We're taking a different approach in this video. We're going to go through a scenario where we've been given an old EX2200 series switch, which works fine, but needs to be set up. We're going to reset it, and then configure it from the ground up. So the first thing we notice is that this switch is not entirely new. Turns out the last person who was using it didn't reset the password before they gave it to us. So that's going to be our first task, recovering the password for the root account. Step 1 is to connect to the console port. There are two ways we could do this. One way is with a USB console cable. If you're using Windows 10, this should be easy. You will just get an extra COM port in the device manager. I'm not sure about other operating systems. You may need to download an additional driver. The other way is with a traditional serial cable with a USB to serial converter. If you've got a console cable that you use to connect to Cisco routers, you should be able to use it here too. Next, we'll use a terminal emulator like Putty to connect to the switch. So far, this should all be quite familiar to you. Now we have a connection, but still no username or password to log in with, so we need to reset the root authentication details. To do this, we need to start by rebooting the switch. While it's booting up, we get a ton of startup messages on the console port. We need to pay attention because we're going to be prompted to press space to interrupt the boot process. Junos hasn't loaded yet. This is just the bootloader, the same as you might find on any Linux system. The bootloader comes with a very limited CLI of its own that we can use for emergency purposes, like a password recovery, or formatting and reloading the switch. We enter the command boot-s, which boots into single user mode. If you're familiar with Linux, you'll know all about that. If you're from the Windows world, this is similar to safe mode. We're still not in Junos yet. This is still FreeBSD, just in single user mode. You can tell by this prompt. As the message here is suggesting, we need to run the recovery script to load Junos in recovery mode. Keep in mind that we can only do this while we're connected to the console port. This will take a while, so I'll speed it up. We're now in the Junos CLI, but because we're in recovery mode, we didn't need a password to log in. From here, we can set a new root password. To do this, we enter configuration mode and set system root authentication and type the password in. There will need to be some password complexity. It needs to be at least 6 characters long, as well as with a mix of upper and lowercase or a mix of regular and special characters. The root password is mandatory in any Junos device. If this were a brand new switch, we would need to set the password before we could commit any other config. We could continue on here and add more configuration, but this is our new device. We want to do everything from the ground up, so we're going to factory reset it and treat it like it's brand new. There are two types of factory reset in Junos. The first uses the load factory default command. This resets all config and accounts except for the root password. The second is request system Zeroize. This is the full factory reset which erases the config as well as other non-default files. This takes longer and is more destructive. Let's go all the way and Zeroize this switch. Notice that it sits here and appears to do nothing for a while? That's normal, we just have to wait. The rest also takes a while and includes a reboot. It's a bit dull to watch, so I'll skip ahead. We are now at a point where the Zeroize is complete and the router has been rebooted. The interesting thing is the hostname. Notice that the hostname is amnesiac. This will happen any time that Junos boots when it couldn't load a config. This could mean that something's wrong, or it could just mean that we factory reset the system. We can now log in with the root account. No password is needed since we just factory reset the system. After the device puts in a bit more effort, and some odd messages that we'll talk about later, we're logged into the switch. Notice that we have a funny looking prompt here. Root means that we're logged in with the root account. The rest means that we're at the FreeBSD shell, not in the Junos CLI. This is normal for a device with no config. Enter CLI to load up the regular Junos CLI. Before going any further, let's put in some very basic config. First, a hostname. This is not mandatory, but it's still a good idea. Next, the root password again, which, as you'll remember, we need to set before we can commit. And finally, a regular user so we can log in over SSH. The root account is only used for console use. This is a larger video than usual, so I'm breaking the quiz questions into 2 parts. Here is part 1. Either pause the video now and work through them, or come back another time. How about we update this switch next? First, we'll get the type of platform we're running with show system information. This platform has no output for that command, so as an alternative, we'll try show chassis hardware. Here we can see the model number and the serial number, which I've blurred out. Now, what version should we update to? Jtac, that's Juniper's Technical Assistance Center, has a recommended version for each device. This is the version that has proven to be the most stable. If we look at their site, we can see the recommended version for this switch. There are newer versions than this, but this is the one they recommend for this exact model. It's up to us if we choose to use this version or not. To download a new version legally, you would need an account and a service contract with Juniper. It's the same as with any enterprise vendor. We're going to use Junos version 15.1, which is the latest version available for this switch, which is still a little on the older side. We should probably look at how to decode Juniper's versioning system. If you're thinking, why bother learning this? Well, one reason is if you're going to do the exam, you'll probably get tested on this. I know I was. This is the format of a Junos version number. M and N are the major and minor release numbers. Z is the release type, and we'll get to that in a minute. B and S are the major and minor build numbers. Generally speaking, major and minor numbers track big releases and contain new features. The build numbers track small changes, which are usually bug fixes. There are 6 release types as shown here, but really there are 2 important ones that you need to remember. R is the main type of software release. R1 is release 1, R2 is release 2, and so on. Anything later than R1 is a bug fix, not a new feature. S is a service release. These are released to fix a specific issue. For example, a service release may fix a critical security flaw. We're going to use version 15.1 R7-S6.3. 15.1 is the major and minor release numbers. R7 means maintenance release 7. You could think of this as a service pack in Windows, for example. And S6.3 is service release 6.3 within maintenance release 7. Not all versions are service releases. Generally, you would use them if they were Jtac recommended, or if you're trying to fix a specific issue that you're facing. Now, let's finally upgrade this switch. First, we want some network config so we can reach our FTP server to copy the update. We set an IP address on the VLAN interface, create a VLAN, bind them together, put an interface in the VLAN, and finally commit. We just run a ping to make sure it's all good. Next, let's make sure that we have enough space with request system storage cleanup. This looks for temporary files and removes any old ones that we don't need. There's not much to remove here as we just zeroize the whole system. In production, you might want to add the dry run keyword. This gives you a list of files to be removed without actively removing them. Now let's copy the update from the FTP server over to /var/tmp. You could also use WinSCP if you wanted to. Sometimes that won't be suitable for some reason. Maybe we don't have network access yet or there's no FTP server. So let me show you how to copy the update from USB. First, make sure you have a FAT32 formatted USB stick available and put the update on it. The next part is run from the system shell as the root user. USB devices will appear under /dev. Take a look here first, and then put the USB stick in. You'll notice we get some console messages when I do that. Now look in /dev again to see what device was added. In our case, the new device is /dev/da1s1. So now we have to mount it. Start by creating a directory that we can use as a mount point. Next, mount the drive with the mount_ms-dos-fs command. Looking inside the mount point, we can see the update file. I'm now just going to check that there's no old update files on the disk. Doesn't look like there are any, so I'm going to copy the update file to local storage. And when that's done, unmount the drive and exit back to the Junos CLI. One way or another, we now have the update file in /var/tmp. We can confirm this by looking in this directory with the file list command. We're ready to install the update with the request system software add command. Optionally, we can add keywords to the end. Validate will check that the new version will work with the current config. Reboot, which I've used here, will automatically reboot the device when the update is done. If you don't use the reboot keyword, you will have to reboot manually with request system reboot. Here's a tip to save time. If you have an FTP server available, you can install directly from there. You can also add the no copy keyword to prevent copying the update to local storage first, which will save some disk space. All of this takes a while, so as before, I'm speeding it all up. Once it's done, log in and run show version, which confirms that the update was successful. There's a major difference between Junos and Cisco iOS. iOS uses a compressed image file, which is decompressed and loaded into memory while the device is starting up. As you've just seen, Junos is FreeBSD or Linux based, and stores operating system files natively on disk like a server would. During boot up, the files are loaded into memory as required. We'll get some more detail on this in videos 12 and 13. A downside to Juniper's method is that, like any Linux system, files on disk can get corrupted if something goes wrong. Not only is this possible, but I've seen it happen quite a few times. It's easy then for a switch to become unstable after a power outage, even possibly to the point where it won't boot at all. The good news is, Juniper has a built-in solution for this. They have a primary and alternate partition for the operating system. If the primary is corrupt, it can boot from the alternate. We can then recover the primary partition ourselves, or depending on configuration, Junos may be able to recover the primary on its own. The version of Junos running on the recovery partition is called the recovery snapshot. The snapshot commands can vary a bit depending on the version of Junos. We see here that our recovery snapshot is out of date. From this, we see that the snapshot does not automatically update when we update Junos. So, all we need to do is update our snapshot to match the primary partition. This does take a while, so once again, I'm going to speed up the video. So earlier I mentioned that Junos can be configured to recover from corruptions automatically. This is with a feature called Auto Snapshot. If a device has a corruption in the primary partition, it will boot from the recovery snapshot. If Auto Snapshot is enabled, Junos will try to rebuild the primary partition automatically. Check if this feature is enabled with Show System Auto Snapshot. If it's not enabled, jump into configuration mode, turn it on, and commit. Now we're all prepared to deal with failures. As promised, here's part 2 of the quiz questions. Really pay attention to question 8. It's something you will likely need to know in the real world as well as in the exam. We've covered a lot, but there is so much that we're going to continue this in a second video. Click on the video you see here to continue configuring this switch.